Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa College. Welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Now, in a moment, I'll share some of a discussion that I had with Will Savell a few weeks ago. Will and I met on LinkedIn, and I was absolutely delighted when he agreed to share our really interesting discussion with you, dear listener, on this podcast. Now, Will introduced himself as a lifelong resident of East Tennessee in the southeastern United States. He was diagnosed as learning disabled, having ADD, attention deficit disorder, at the age of 6. And he further described himself as someone who has an inexplicable gravitational attraction for dogs, and one of them did indeed join us at the end of the podcast. He's also an amateur culinarian. Now, in that discussion, most of which you can find in episode 43 of this podcast, Will shared some very rich examples of neuroinclusion in 2 restaurants in his area of the world. And I decided to extract that part of the podcast into this episode today. So we're going to join the conversation when I just asked Will about how inclusion is talked about in the sectors, that's hospitality, pet care, and agriculture, that he works in. I hope you enjoy listening.
In my experience, restaurants are the most open to drive inclusion initiatives. I think adoption occurs when the change appeals directly to the owner's core values. Size also seems to play a role. Small family-based businesses tend to adopt measures to empower someone they know is neurodivergent very rapidly, whereas larger organizations take significantly longer. Jeremiah Cafe is a collaborative effort to provide job training specifically for people who are on the autism spectrum in the restaurant industry in Johnson City, Tennessee. And their goal is to empower students to really be able to integrate into roles at restaurants throughout the area after their training. Before the Jeremiah Cafe project, Main Street Cafe and Catering in Jonesboro, Tennessee, which is actually, it's the oldest town in Tennessee. They championed inclusion in a very broad way for nearly 40 years.
Wow. I mean, that's really been going on for a long time. I think you make a very important point, right? That it's easy to start small. It is maybe easier for a small business to go in this direction than a larger business, if a large business wants to transform itself completely. But a large business can also start small, as you're describing, with a pilot of one team or one department, and then scale up. But let's get back to these restaurants. I mean, I'd love to ask you. I think these are fascinating examples that you shared. I'd love to ask you to expand a bit more on the adjustments that Jeremiah Cafe and the Main Street Cafe and Catering have made, if that would be okay.
Yeah, Jeremiah Cafe is a teaching restaurant that's geared specifically towards training students on the autism spectrum, and they teach them how to perform in the restaurant industry, and they especially work on those chaotic scenarios that can become overwhelming. They train students in hosting, in waiting, register management, culinary skills, and also in maintenance and making sure that all the standards are upkept. So they have a chef that specifically works with neurodivergent students, and they have special instructors who work with students with autism. Assistance is provided developing verbal communication skills, learning to deal with customers, and building teams, right? So you have to be able to interact and interface well with everyone. Main Street Cafe is an independently owned restaurant that has been in operation since 1982. They've made a reputation for themselves as a place that will help anyone. And when it comes to neurodiversity, it's a natural extension of who they are. Zach, the owner, is a high energy go-getter who grew up in the restaurant. And he maintains a one-on-one clear, direct communication with his employees and his guests. There's never a time when you're confused as to what Zach is trying to say, because if you can't understand when he's speaking, he'll pull out a notepad and he'll start either writing, or he has his own version of it's not sign language, but it's a very physically expressive way of communicating that he uses to really connect with people, and it works. If also he keeps a very even keel. There's not a lot that gets him flustered. So he's able to keep a calm presence in the restaurant no matter what. And I think that really helps the staff. He really goes out of the way to defend his team. Most customers are very nice folks, but no rudeness is allowed. And errant customers learn fairly quickly that they're not always right. The kitchen space is almost a galley style when you go back to the back of the house. And so there's very clear physical delineations as to where each station is, and there's an open line of sight throughout. So Zach and his manager, Fred, are always moving and keeping in contact with their team, and they troubleshoot and they expedite all the orders themselves. So because of that direct, and they have a very empathetic style, they've learned to integrate team members into roles where they're the strongest. So if someone suffers from being socially overwhelmed, they can move them into back of the house, like prep, dishwashing. If somebody just needs to get away for a minute, they can go to the salad station, or even just pull in from the walk-in freezer. If you have an employee who's very energetic, they can run orders for the servers. They really make it that simple, and there's no room for somebody to be left out or fall through the cracks or be ignored. There's no one that the manager doesn't really interface with directly and repeatedly throughout a shift.
Right. I mean, thanks for preparing that and sharing it with us. It's just fascinating, I think, what can be achieved when somebody decides to enable, despite challenges that people are having. And I'd just like to pause for a moment and share a few thoughts of my own. That in both of those examples which you've given, there's a shared factor in really being very, very clear, crystal clear in the experience that both of those restaurants wants to give to their guests. I think that's one factor in being very inclusive of people who are autistic or otherwise neurodivergent or think in a different way to us, that everybody knows very clearly what's expected. There's no flexibility in what's expected. But in knowing that framework, there's a lot of flexibility within it, so that everybody can offer their best in their own style and bring their particular brand of strengths to the cooking, to the cleaning, to the experience of the customers. Even though all of those contributions is different, I think this brings it really nicely to life. And I think you've also described a very respectful approach there, and I see characteristics in what you've talked about of teams which have been extremely thoughtfully designed to connect people with different approaches to how they add value. I know you're talking about restaurants, but I think there's direct parallels to any working environment, including office environments as well. You've mentioned really calm leadership. That's important. Calm leadership with clear communication. Okay, different communication styles, but clear communication, and that stays consistent even when there's pressure on. You've mentioned playing to people's strengths, like some people being in back of house if they find social situations draining, or just taking a break if they need a break. front of house for those with high energy. I mean, great. Who doesn't want to have a job that matches their natural style, neurodivergent or not? And you've mentioned really inclusive dynamics as well, with everybody being seen and valued and enabled, regardless of their own style, and everybody able to contribute to that customer experience, even when they might be getting overwhelmed. There's no fault given. It's just, yeah, okay, just take a break. We'll just get on with it and make sure the customer has a good experience. I think it's it's fascinating. So let me I've been mentioning the customer a few times in that little aside, the Lisa aside. So can I ask you, in terms of the customer experience, do you think that the customers experience something different when they go to Jeremiah Cafe or Main Street Cafe as opposed to a more typical restaurant? Like, are there more repeat customers or different kind of loyalty? Or I'm just curious whether that very inclusive approach, that very consciously designed inclusive approach, has an impact on how the customers would enjoy their dining experience.
It does. The customer experience is very different, especially at the Jeremiah Cafe, because it is a teaching restaurant. Guests interact directly with young people on the autism spectrum who are new to the restaurant industry. This is something that's communicated on their website, and also there's signs on the door and tables, just to let people know that it is a learning restaurant and to be kind. And each guest is expected to be part of that teaching process. So food quality at Jeremiah Cafe, I would say, is on par with other restaurants in the area that do the same. And their service is excellent. So while things may happen a little bit more slowly, you get more interaction with the staff and not less. And you never have an unattentive server. That's for certain. They're always right there. So now with Main Street Cafe, it's one of the longest lived eating establishments in the region. And I think they've really developed a loyal following of guests who've eaten their entire lives. There's also a significant volume of tourist traffic because of where it is. And in many ways, Main Street Cafe has really laid the foundation for what a casual lunchtime eatery in the area looks like. It has a very streamlined system for guests. They come in the door, they see a very large chalkboard menu that's updated daily, plus they have the paper menu, and they order before and pay before they're seated, and then they find a place in the restaurant that they want to sit, and the order's brought to them. They're going to interact with the staff a lot. I think it's a very talkative place, and they end up saying hi, and they try to engage the customer, find out where they're from, what's brought them to town, and if they're a local, of course, that gets a bit more involved. And you're going to run into Zach or Fred at least once or twice before you head out the door. So I think that it's a very positive dynamic there. The food quality is very high, and I really think that the interaction with the staff there has actually caused some folks to choose to move to the East Tennessee area when they come in for, like, the storytelling festival. They really feel welcomed and at home.
Wow. Yeah, I just love these examples. I mean, we can think that we go to a restaurant to eat and that's it, but you just described two very different ways of getting to a meal, and And that's one of the most important things I think that we can bear in mind when we think about neurodivergence inclusion, in enabling it, but also in experiencing it, that okay, we all have a goal, but there's so many different ways to get to that goal, and one isn't better than the other one. It's just different, and these are great examples of that observation, I think. And there's just so much that you've shared in what we can learn from. I think I could talk about that with you all day. Well, I would have liked to have talked about that more with Will, but we got back onto the topic that we wanted to focus on, which was Will's experiences that led him to start to be more open about his own neurodivergence and the response that he's received to that openness. We also talked about the impact of the current American administration on inclusion. And finally, we talked about the different levels of comfort that people have in engaging in discussions about neurodivergence. It's so important to meet people where they are and not dismiss any discomfort. And Will closed that podcast by sharing some tips to help people who do want to learn more, but are perhaps not quite sure how to get started. So you can listen to that conversation that I'm describing now in episode 43 of this podcast. But if you enjoyed listening to Will talking about these neuro-inclusive restaurants, then please share the link to this podcast with a connection who you think will also be interested. Every little bit of awareness that we can all help to build contributes to a more neuro-inclusive world where everyone can contribute their best. And if Will's got you thinking about how different members of your team contribute in varied ways and how you can enable those different ways of bringing value to your team as a whole, then let me help you with that. Book a free consultation with me and we'll talk about what you're seeing, and we'll think about how neuro-inclusion can make your team more engaging for everyone and also higher performing. Perhaps not for your diners, but for whichever clients you're serving. You can find the link to book that free consultation in the episode notes. Thanks for listening.